And welcome back. In this video you will learn about deliberate practice and how you can make the most of your practice and training time. Have you ever wondered why people are so good at sports, or any field for that matter? Whether it's music, dance, science, competitive sports, there's always a person who excels and is exceptional. We tend to say that this person is gifted or has an innate talent. But is this really the case? Is it nature or nurture? Anders Ericsson, a Swedish psychologist, an expert in experts, studied exactly how people improve something. His research findings found that the reason you aren't a virtuoso violinist or a world-class performer is that you haven't engaged in deliberate practice or purposeful practice. Ericsson began his research by conducting a memory experiment with a young student. Ericsson's systematic approach to deliberate practice enabled a young man to go from remembering just 7 number digits to over 80. Through deliberate practice, he had in fact displayed memory powers over 10 times that of an average person. Professor Ericsson has since worked with international organisations like Oxford, Harvard, and professional sports teams like Manchester City and UK Sport. So let's take a look at deliberate practice and how to do it. A lot of athletes, football players, golfers, tennis players and athletes just go out and play the game. They think they're actually practicing, what we might call a passive practice. Take a golfer who just goes down the green and practices her putting. She doesn't really have an idea of what it is she needs to change. She just hits a few balls and goes away thinking she has practiced. When you are practicing deliberately, you focus on specific parts of your game. So in the case of the golfer, she could focus on 4-metre putts. And I would suggest that she worked on how she could improve the accuracy of putts over a month by getting the golf balls closer to the pin. The fundamental difference with deliberate practice is that you are setting up a goal at the start of the practice. When you initiate deliberate practice, you are setting up measurable goals. Once you do this, you can question yourself, ask yourself, what is it that I should be doing to reach a higher level of performance? This is best done with a coach or a teacher. However, you can collate the data yourself and you can still do it on your own. Working with an experienced coach in your sport will make you more aware of where you are going wrong and give you technical advice and techniques and strategies to improve your game. In this video, I will describe what the right type of practice is and how it can be put to work. These essential processes will draw from the latest research from Ericsson on the best in the world, what they do to reach their peak performance. After conducting many studies on the acquisition of skills like violinists, dancers and grandmaster chess players, Anders Ericsson defined deliberate practice as the following. In deliberate practice, it is essential that each practice pushes the student out of their comfort zone. It requires the student to constantly strive for things beyond his or her current abilities. We mentioned before that deliberate practice involves clearly defining a goal for each session and is about working on one aspect of your game. For a tennis player, it might be to serve more consistently. That is all very well, serve more consistently. However, and what does that mean? It means that a higher percentage of balls go into the serving zone at a high specific speed. Because if we were to slow down our hitting speed, we would, I'm sure, improve our consistency. However, the rate our opponent would return would be greater and put us under pressure. So, in a practice session, the goal might be to hit 40 out of 50 full-pace balls into the service zone. I think the key here is that you're able to measure and get early feedback. You see, once you've set a goal, you or your coach needs to develop a plan to make small changes that will in time lead to a better performance. One of the other videos is purely on setting goals and how you can set big picture goals, performance goals and process goals. Make sure you check it out as it's critical to your improved performance. Okay, the next important factor when doing deliberate practice is to practice deliberately. This involves a person paying full attention during training with a high level of concentration on the activity. To just go through the motions is not enough. The player or athlete must be consciously aware of their actions, their behaviour, their body position in relation to the dynamics of their sport. By being aware, a player, athlete can make those fine adjustments to improve the results they are getting. This comes on to our next point. Practice involves feedback and immediate correction of effort as a result of that feedback. Early on during an athlete's career, much of the feedback will come from a teacher or coach. Yet as the athlete becomes more experienced, they will learn to monitor themselves, spot mistakes and adjust accordingly. This kind of self-monitoring requires the person to have detailed internal mental representations of how a skill is performed. So the next factor for a successful deliberate practice is to have improved mental representations for your sport. A mental representation is an embodiment of visual, auditory, kinesthetic patterns that you have when playing. This allows you to compare your actual performance with your mental representation and self-correct if required. When you embody a skill, you know when you perform well. You know in your body. This is when a tennis player or a cricketer hits that sweet spot. The last aspect of deliberate practice is the acquisition of specific skills, which over time will lead to expertise. New skills are built on the foundation of existing skills, which are refined and are continually practiced, so the player doesn't need to relearn. It becomes unconscious. So a footballer, for example, at every level, a player must work on their first touch and passing. It is a fundamental aspect of the game. If these skills are not continually practiced, then the player's performance falls apart. Okay, so how can we apply the principles of deliberate practice and make sure your time is spent wisely? Number one, it is best to have a coach or a teacher who can work with you to identify your areas for improvement. Number two, use proven methods and strategies that have been used by the most successful athletes. If there's a certain way to convert a jump shot in basketball or perform a volley in football, use these techniques from the best. When I was about 10 years old, I received a snooker book for Christmas. I was obsessed by snooker and wanted to improve my game. In the book, the world champion at the time, Steve Davis, demonstrated many techniques to improve my game. Using these shortcuts, I went away and practiced manipulating the cue ball. It was these techniques that enabled me to improve the quickest and make the most progress. What we have to do is stand on the shoulders of giants. It's about identifying the expert performers, then figuring out what they do to get such amazing performances. Number three, rather than going through the motions during an activity, focus on consciously developing and refining your skills. This is essentially useful for sports like swimming, rowing and running. Whilst training for these sports, it's easy to slip into a daydream state and just mindlessly train for hours on end, getting bored and zoning out. Deliberate practice is about learning to focus throughout the whole session. A swimmer, for example, should be focusing on defining the mental representation of her stroke, figuring out exactly what it feels like to get that perfect, efficient stroke. Once she knows what that ideal stroke feels like, she can notice when she deviates from that ideal. So it's full concentration and effort that will get you the greatest gains over time, not necessarily the amount of hours you clock up. Number four, shorter training sessions with clear goals are much more efficient than longer periods. This is due to the amount of concentration required to improve. It's far better to train at 100% effort for less time than 70% effort for longer periods. Number 5, have a belief that you can succeed when you don't feel like it. Okay, so the power of belief can even trump reality. Number 6, realise that not all practice is fun. In fact, most of it is not nice and it's quite painful. Also realise that over time your body and mind will get used to the practice. Runners get acclimatised to a particular type of pain associated with their sport. It doesn't seem to be as mentally or physically tough. The more you train, the more your mind and body will adapt. Number 7, deliberate practice can be a lonely pursuit, so employ a social group. One of the strongest forms of extrinsic motivation is social motivation. We thirst for the admiration and approval of others. Young children are often motivated by playing a sport because they are seeking the approval of their parents, and many teenagers are motivated by recognition of their achievement from their peers. So build a social environment where you get great support, acknowledgement of your progress, and peers that will push you on to even greater things. There's this saying in business that your network is your net worth. It means that when you work with others who share your values, interests, and are very capable in their field, it enables you to reach a higher level of success than you would on your own. In the sporting arena, this is essential. The very best train and play with the very best. The best tennis players, the best athletes, and the best cyclists need a support network which will provide the stimulus for success. So, wherever possible, work with a team or a small group of like-minded individuals. Number 8, chunk it down. There could be nothing more demotivating than not seeing yourself progress. The hours and hours of practice must seem to be making a difference. To make it more visible for you, use chunking. Take a goal and break it into bite-sized chunks. This will help you to target a range of different aspects of your sport. A golfer could actually break down their training into all the different clubs that he uses. If he were to practice putting, he would create training games that were measurable. For example, mark out 5 spots, 3 feet from the hole, then putt 20 shots from each spot and measure the score. Now, as there were 100 shots in total, you would obviously get an easy percentage and be able to record and track your progress over a number of weeks. His goal might be to get a greater distance with his driver shots. His shots could then be calculated in total distance achieved, and over time he could measure his consistency and progress. And one by one, club by club, he could practice, each being measured and providing feedback each day to which areas need improving. Okay, so we've covered in great detail what deliberate practice is and the keys to achieving an effective practice. In the next video, we will look at goal setting and how you can formulate a plan to improve your sporting endeavour. Okay, that's it for this one. You'll see me in the next.